A very good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Beetv Global News at 12. I am Ruth Obodu, and now the news in detail. President Donald Trump has marked the ceremonial renaming of a roadway near his private club, Mar-a-Lago, in Palm Beach, Florida, adding to a growing list of buildings, programs, and initiatives bearing his name. The report.
The roadway, located close to the former president's Palm Beach residence and social club, was officially designated in his honor during a local ceremony attended by supporters and officials. The move reflects continued recognition of Trump by allies in Republican-led areas, particularly in Florida, where he maintains strong political and personal ties. Local authorities backing the renaming said the decision was intended to recognize Trump's influence and legacy, especially among supporters who view him as a transformative figure in American politics. They described the roadway naming as largely symbolic, noting that it does not affect postal addresses or emergency services. Trump, speaking during the event, praised Florida officials and residents for the gesture, calling it an honor. He also highlighted his long-standing relationship with the state, which he has increasingly treated as his political base since leaving the White House. Critics, however, have questioned the practice of naming public infrastructure after leaving political figures, arguing that such actions can be divisive. Some local residents have expressed concerns that the renaming prioritizes political symbolism over broader community needs. The Palm Beach roadway joins a widening list of Trump-branded sites across the United States. These include courthouses, highways, public programs, and private developments named in recognition of him, largely driven by Republican lawmakers or local councils aligned with his political movement. The latest addition underscores Trump's continued prominence in U.S. political life and the loyalty he commands among supporters, even outside formal public office. It also highlights how his influence continues to shape symbolic decisions at state and local levels, particularly in conservative strongholds like Florida. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for Beetv News.
The rising cost of living continues to shape political conversations across the United States as voters weigh President Donald Trump's economic policies 1 year into his current term. In Arizona, a key battleground state ahead of the midterm elections, opinions remain sharply divided, with voters offering constructing assessments of the administration's efforts to make life more affordable. The report.
For Martha Leimas, a Phoenix-based small business employee, the president's economic agenda has fallen short of expectations. She says everyday expenses, particularly groceries, rent and utilities, have continued to rise faster than wages. Everything costs more now, Leimas said. When the administration talks about the economy doing well, that doesn't reflect what I see when I go to the store or pay my bills. I don't feel any real relief. Leimas argued that while national economic indicators may suggest stability, the benefits are not reaching working families. She believes federal policies have not done enough to ease inflationary pressures or reduce household costs, especially for middle and low-income earners. In contrast, Emily Chaffin, a retiree living in Mesa, views President Donald Trump's affordability efforts more favorably. She credits the administration's focus on domestic energy production and tax policies while helping to prevent prices from rising rising even faster. I don't think things would be better under different leadership, Chaffin said. Gas prices have been more manageable at times, and I believe the president is trying to put America first economically. This problem didn't start overnight. Chaffin acknowledges that prices remain high, but argues that global factors and past economic disruptions continue to affect the cost of living. She says the administration deserves more time to see its policies fully take effect. The differing views reflect a broader national divide as Americans assess the president's handling of affordability, inflation, and economic growth. While the White House has highlighted job creation, energy policy, and tax measures as signs of progress, many voters remain focused on personal financial strain and purchasing power. As the midterm election approach, analysts say cost of living concerns are likely to remain central to voter decision-making in Arizona and beyond. For voters more like Lamas and Chaffin, the question is not just how the economy looks on paper, but how it feels in daily life, a debate that could play a decisive role at the ballot box. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado expressed confidence that Venezuela will ultimately move toward free and democratic elections, even as she acknowledged that dismantling the country's entrenched criminal regime will be a difficult and complex process. The report.
Speaking at a press conference in Washington, D.C., a day after presenting her Nobel Peace Prize medal to U.S. President Donald Trump, Mercado said she was profoundly confident that Venezuela will experience an orderly transition to democracy. She told reporters that she believes the powerful structures that have dominated Venezuelan politics for years would eventually break down, paving the way for democratic reforms. Mercado made her remarks at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank known for its influence in U.S. policy circles. She described the current situation as a delicate and complex phase and stressed that the transition would take time and require overcoming significant challenges. Although Mercado insisted her comments were not intended to highlight personal tensions with Delcy Rodriguez, the interim leader backed by the United States, following the capture of Nicolas Maduro. She reiterated that the political system long controlled by Maduro's supporters is unsustainable and will eventually dissolve. The opposition leader's confidence comes amid continued international involvement in Venezuelan political future. While Mercado's movement was widely seen as having won the country's disputed 2024 presidential election, the Trump administration has for now recognized Rodriguez's interim government as the one best positioned to maintain stability, especially in the country's oil sector. Mercado did not provide a specific timeline for elections or detailed plan for her own return to Venezuela. Instead, she focused on broad themes of democratic renewal and the need for a peaceful transition built on institutional change. Her remarks reflect both optimism about Venezuela's future and the recognition that much work remains before free, widely accepted elections can be held. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
U.S. stocks closed nearly flat at the end of a volatile trading session as investors scale back risks ahead of a long holiday weekend, with major indices struggling to find clear direction amid mixed economic signals and cautious sentiment. The report.
I think the big focus has been really on AI and how that is driving technology, but it's so much broader than that. You have robotics, blockchain.
Trading on Wall Street was marked by sharp intraday swings as early gains gave way to losses before stock recovered slightly towards the end. Investors largely avoided taking strong positions, choosing instead to lock in profit or stay on the sidelines after a week of uneven market performance. The S&P 500 finished the session marginally lower and ended the week in negative territory, pressured by weakness in key sectors including technology and consumer discretionary. Concerns over interest rate policy combined with uncertainty about the pace of economic growth weighed on broader market confidence throughout the week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also fluctuated between gains and losses during the session, reflecting mixed performances among blue-chip stocks. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Composite was constrained by selling in large-cap tech shares as investors reassessed valuations following recent sent allies. Market sentiment remained cautious as participants digested recent economic data, which offered no clear signal on when the Federal Reserve might begin easing monetary policy. Persistent inflation concerns and the prospect of interest rates staying higher for longer continued to influence trading decisions. With U.S. markets set to close for the long weekend, trading volumes were lighter than usual, contributing to the sharper price action. Analysts noted that the lack of major catalysts encouraged a defensive posture as investors awaited fresh economic data and corporate earnings in the coming week. Overall, Wall Street ended the session little change, but the S&P 500 weekly declined, underscored lingering uncertainty in the market as investors remain focused on inflation traits, interest rates expectation, and the outlook for economic growth. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Argentina and Chile have announced a new joint conservation initiative aimed at protecting Patagonia's vast peatlands, ecosystems increasingly recognized as critical in the global fight against climate change. The report.
Peatlands, which are waterlogged landscapes made up of partially decomposed organic matter, are among the world's most effective natural carbon sinks. Although they cover a relatively small portion of the Earth's surface, they store more carbon than all the world's forests combined. Patagonia's peatlands, stretching across South Argentina and Chile, are considered some of the most carbon-rich and least disturbed on the planet. The new cross-border effort seeks to coordinate conservation policies, scientific research, and land use management across national boundaries. Environmental authorities from both countries say the initiative will improve monitoring of peatland health, limit destructive activities such as drainage and overgrazing, and promote restoration in areas already damaged. Officials involved in the project emphasized that promoting peatlands is not about biodiversity, but also climate resilience. When peatlands are drained or degrade, the carbon stored over thousands of years is released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, accelerating global warming. Healthy peatlands, by contrast, continue to absorb and lock away carbon while regulating water flows and reducing flood risk. The initiative also highlights the role of the local and indigenous communities who have long depended on Patagonian ecosystem for grazing, water, and cultural practices. Authorities say community participation will be central to conservation planning, ensuring that protection measures support sustainable livelihoods rather than restrict them. Scientists welcomed the agreement, noting that Patagonia's peatland have often been overlooked in conservation strategies compared to forests or oceans. With climate pressures increasing and land use demands expanding, experts warn that delays in protection could lead to irreversible damage. By working together, Argentina and Chile aim to position Patagonia as a model for international cooperation on nature-based climate solutions. The initiative reflects a growing global recognition with safeguarding carbon-rich ecosystems is essential to meeting climate targets and preserving fragile environments for future generations. Zainab Mohammed reporting for Beetv News.
A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers met with Danish and Greenland officials in Denmark this week in a bid to foster dialogue and reduce tensions following President Donald Trump's controversial remarks about the potential purchase or annexation of Greenland. He reports.
The meetings described by participants as constructive and cordial focused on strengthening U.S., Danish and U.S. Greenland relations, particularly in areas of security, trade and Arctic cooperation. Lawmakers stressed that diplomacy and cooperation are central to the U.S. approach aiming to reassure Greenland and Denmark of Washington's long-term commitment to the region. The purpose of our visit is to engage directly and listen carefully, said one U.S. lawmaker who participated in the delegation. We want to maintain strong partnerships in the Arctic and ensure misunderstandings do not escalate tensions. Danish officials welcomed the dialogue, noting that Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark and that any discussions regarding sovereignty must respect that framework. Greenland representatives also emphasized their interest in continued cooperation on economic development, environmental protection, and Arctic security. The trip comes after President Trump's comments about buying Greenland drew international attention and criticism, prompting Denmark's Prime Minister to describe the idea as absurd. Lawmakers said the meetings were designed to return discussions to a more diplomatic and cooperative pact, addressing strategic interests without undermining the autonomy of Greenland. Observers say the delegation's visit signals a bipartisan effort in Congress to maintain calm and constructive relations in the Arctic, amid growing global attention to the region's geopolitical and economic importance. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for Beetv News.
And now to the business news. The United Nations World Food Programme has warned that about 55 million people across West and Central Africa could face crisis levels of hunger or worse during this June to August 2026 lean season if urgent funding and humanitarian action are not mobilized. The worsening situation is being driven by conflicts, displacement, and significant reductions in humanitarian assistance across the region. The report.
Nigeria is among the 4 most affected countries alongside Chad, Cameroon and Niger, which together accounts for 77% of the region's food insecure population. In Nigeria, about 15,000 people in Borno State are at risk of catastrophic hunger, classified as IPC Phase 5, marking the first time in nearly a decade that such conditions have been recorded in the state amid prolonged insurgency and shrinking aid support. The WFP also projected that more than 13 million children across West and Central Africa would suffer acute malnutrition in 2026. According to the latest Cadell Harmonize analysis, over 3 million people are expected to face emergency levels of food insecurity this year, more than double the figure recorded in 2020. Transport Film seeks stronger collaboration on road safety. Okeson Transport has reiterated its commitment to passenger safety, stating that it operates in line with standard operating procedures that comply with the guidelines of the Federal Road Safety Commission. The company made this known following a recent engagement between its management team and road safety officials. The visit was led by the managing director of Okeson Transport, Charles Oke Udeji, alongside other senior officials of the company. Discussions during the engagement focused on improving road safety standards, strengthening driver professionalism, and enhancing collaboration between transport operators and regulatory authorities. Meanwhile, the Federal Road Safety Corps reported that more than 3,400 people lost their lives in road crashes across Nigeria between January and September 2025. The corps attributed the fatalities and over 22,000 injuries recorded within the period to reckless driving, human error, driver fatigue, overloading, phone use while driving, and other preventable safety violations. MAN backs tax law to aid recovery. The Manufacturing Association of Nigeria and the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform, Taiwo Oyedele, has expressed support for the newly enacted tax law, saying they are aimed at helping Nigerian businesses recover, regain competitiveness, and expand into regional markets after years of multiple taxation and policy inconsistencies. Speaking at a stakeholders engagement in Lagos, Oyedele noted that the previous tax regime made Nigerian manufacturers uncompetitive even with the domestic market, as imported goods often landed cheaper despite freight and duty costs. He warned that without reforms, Nigeria risking losing jobs and investment to neighboring countries, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area. Oyedele explained that manufacturers have faced disproportionately high effective tax rates due to numerous legal and illegal levies imposed by various actors. He said the new reforms are focused on economic growth rather than punitive taxation, stressing that a more supportive business environment would allow companies to grow, increase output, and ultimately generate higher government revenue. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for.
And now to the entertainment news. Reality star Fina has claimed that she's yet to receive the 100 million prize she won after emerging winner of the Big Brother Naija reality show in 2022. She made a revelation during a recent live stream with her fans, revisiting an issue she had earlier raised publicly in 2024. The report.
According to FINA, the prize package from the organizers Multi-Choice Nigeria remains incomplete, with several components still outstanding. She listed the unpaid elements to include cash equivalents and all expenses paid trip for two and product supplies from some sponsors attached to the show. She said the prolonged delay has negatively affected both her personal life and career, forcing her to continue speaking out despite criticism. Although Multi-Choice Nigeria has previously stated that it fulfilled all its obligations to the winner, FINA insists the matter remains unresolved and says she went public after her earlier complaints were ignored. A viral video has captured the moment Super Eagles star Victor Boniface reached out to popular Nigerian TikToker Pella during a live stream. The interaction followed Boniface surprising the content creator with virtual gifts on TikTok. During their phone conversation, Pella questioned why Boniface decided to call him while also expressing appreciation for the gesture. Boniface in response appeared amused and asked if Pella was raising his voice at him, prompting a light-hearted exchange between both parties. The moment came days after Pella publicly pledged to reward Ademola Lookman with 500,000 naira for every goal scored against Morocco in the AFCON semi-final. However, Nigeria lost the match 4-2 on penalties and will now face Egypt in the third place playoffs. Singer Speed Darlington has reacted to the Super Eagles failure to win the Africa Cup of Nations, expressing apparent satisfaction following Nigeria's elimination from the tournament. The national team crashed out after losing 4-2 on penalties to host nation Morocco in the semi-final. The tightly contested encounter ended in a goalless draw after regulation time and extra time before Nigeria missed two spot kicks during the shootouts. The Super Eagles had hoped to secure a fourth AFCON title but saw their campaign come to an abrupt end. Reacting to social media, Speed Darlington linked the team's defeat to Nigerian politics, suggesting that the ruling party could not claim the team's performance as an achievement. Following the loss, Nigeria will now face Egypt in the third place playoffs as they aim to secure a bronze medal. And that's it on the entertainment news. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
And that is all on our 12 p.m. Global News. Thank you for joining and stay tuned for our 3 p.m. news updates. I'm Ruth Obodu. Bye for now.
Religion.